Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Roundtable with Norua Edopolo. This is the space where we address real-life issues and pressing challenges that Christians face, and we try to find answers that glorify God, answers that give, help us to stand for Him, proudly. As usual, I'm your host. My name is Norua Edopolo, and today's topic is one that is sensitive, sadly so, prevalent even amongst believers. We're asking the question, what do we do with the side chick? Today we're going to talk about the biblical approach to addressing this issue. Infidelity has become an increasingly visible challenge, even within Christian circles. I mean, a couple of months, I think, ago, there was this increase in articles and stuff on social media talking about, trying to promote polygamy, oh, there are this number of women in the world and this number of men. So if all the men marry one wife, what will happen to all the other women? In the Bible, this person had more than one wife. And I was like, where's this coming from? And this was being shared by Christians, as if, when you share something, in other words, you agree with the opinion. And so you want it to go far and wide. And that's where we are today. All right. Now, our goal today is to provide not only godly counsel, but also hope, for healing and restoration. And I like to say that whoever you are that will eventually get to watch this at some point in your journey, I'd like you to know that God can still make a way for you. And that is what we're going to be doing today. We're going to talk about this topic. We're going to open it up. Why does it happen? How can we fix it? Et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not alone, and I'm really privileged to have this very distinguished guest with me today, Ejiro Okolo and Mrs. Modukbe Ehirim. Incidentally, unknown to me now, I had known Ejiro, he said to me recently he had sat in a class I taught at the Institute for National Transformation. And Mrs. Ehirim is somebody I've known for a long time and somebody I admire both from a distance and, from close quarters. I'm very, very proud of, literally speaking, what you have become. I know where we met, what you were doing, and I see what you are doing now. You're one of the elderly people that has colonized social media, and you are using it in a decent way. So well done, ma. So I'm going to be asking you to introduce yourselves as, briefly. But before then, I always like to put forward a disclaimer that whatever we say on this program, we are speaking for ourselves and we do not represent any other entity or authority, as the case may be. So just in case you know us in other capacities, for this program, I'm Norua Edopolo, that's Ejiro Okolo, and this is Modukbe Ehirim. So, Ejiro, maybe you should go first. Tell us, who is Ejiro? And why should you be discussing this topic? What gives you the permission to speak on this topic? Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Ejiro Okolo. I'm a behavioral scientist by training. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology and anthropology. For over 2 decades, I've been very, very passionate and interested about human nature. I like to know why people do the things they do, what influences their behavior and all that. Naturally given to observation. And all that interest zeroed into relationships. And I've been studying it, trying to understand its relationships in every way, from family relationships, relationships at work, and all that stuff. So I've been very, very interested in it. And it has caused me to do extensive research in that regard. And part of this research has led me to write more than 20 different books. And I've published a couple of them. This is one of them, Mismatch. Incompatibility is a big issue today. Many people do what they do in marriage is damage control because they married wrong. Another one of them is the relationship effects. I have Battle for Your Marriage. I have Battle for Your Husband. I have a couple of them like that. What gives me the impetus to speak in this regard is because I understand that in marriage, especially, sometimes years of experience in marriage is not the only criteria that you need to be able to have wisdom to communicate in that regard. Just because you work in the hospital for 35 years, it doesn't mean that you're a medical doctor. A child that was born in your present would study, and under 30 years, they are medical doctors because they went through a system and a curriculum in that regard. I have gone through systems and processes, and with that, I'm a relationship coach and a marriage counselor. And with leveraging on the wisdom of
Thank you
God.
very
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Hiram. Ma.
Okay. My own journey into marriage counseling was a different one. I'm Modukwe Ehirim. I'm 65 years old, actually. I'm married to my husband for 39 years, and we've known one another for 44 years. I agree totally with what Ejiro said about, the number of years not being the required qualification. That was my experience when I volunteered in church, and I started doing premarital counseling as a volunteer, spending 14 hours with each couple, preparing them for marriage. One of the first things I observed there was that there were a lot of things that I was not aware of as a person. I had the privilege of having parents who were married for 60 years and who had a healthy marriage. I'm surrounded by a lot of healthy marriages, so I didn't even know. But volunteering in church made me to see that everybody has already learned a lot about marriage by the time they're 12. The only thing is that what they learned is not obvious until they actually start doing relationship of their own. So that's what led me in 2016 to start the Right Fit Marriage Academy. And I focused largely on I thought we learn about marriage in a community, not in lessons as we teach. So we have this community where there are widowed people, young people, married people, single people, male, female, and we have conversations around marriage, just like we will have it in a real community. And I remember that about 6 years ago, I was invited to come and speak on the topic, what should a woman do so that a side chick will not take her husband? And I was incensed, because yes, I was thinking, why is the responsibility being put on the woman? And I wasn't doing that because I was a woman. I just was perplexed that if somebody cheats and you now say it is their partner that should be making sure that they don't cheat. So for that program, I actually researched. And what I found out started me on a journey of studying infidelity, why it happens, and all of those things, the impact. And one major thing I found out was that I remember Dr. Willard Haley saying that he interviewed a woman who had been raped when she was young and whose husband now cheated on her. And in talking to her, she said to him that the pain I felt when I found out that my husband cheated is worse than the pain I felt when I was raped. And I was shocked at that. I was shocked. And then she qualified it and said, the person who raped me, I don't know him. It's easy for me to blame them. I said, but when my husband cheats on me, and men have also said this to me, whose wives cheat on them, my heart breaks in a totally different way. Why? Because this is somebody I thought I knew, who I trusted, and who I felt would have my back. So what they did to me is worse than what the stranger did to me. So that set me out on a journey that I needed to understand infidelity, what causes it, and why it happens. And the more that I have studied it, the more I realize that we actually don't know much about it, and we are handling the issues in very wrong ways.
Wow. If ever there was somebody competent to speak on the topic, behold. Thank you so much, Ma. Thank you, Ejiro. And, for me, this just, says to me that we have a problem in this area. And the sooner we stop playing the ostrich, the better for us, okay? So, Ma, let me start with you. So why do you think the issue of the side chick has become so prevalent, even among believers? And maybe as we are progressing in this conversation, let's look at the side chick both from the side of the man and the woman, all right? Let us say to ourselves, the third party. Maybe we'll move from side chick now to the third
We
party.
call them side cocks. As you have the side chick,
Very
you
good.
also have the
Side chick and the side cocks. Very good. Because, you know, I really want to be gender sensitive and, you know, play it, because sometimes, unfortunately now, it's happening on both sides, you know. So what has happened? Why do we have the issue of the side chick and the side cock so prevalent, even among Christians?
That's a really great question. I think for me, the environment in which we do marriage has changed. And you know, like when you put a frog in a bowl of cold water and you start heating up the water, the frog somehow, the way God has made it, is not aware that the environment is changing, and then, you know, he dies when the water boils. We started doing marriage from being geographically co-located. What that meant is relationships were done in a community where everybody understood what the paradigms are, what the beliefs are, and there was a process for grooming young people. So once you're born and you're growing, you're learning, this is the way we do. This is how marriage is. This is how we relate with one another. Polygamy existed in that situation, but everybody understood what polygamy was about. And even if a man wanted to take an additional wife, or in the cases where, you know, it was the other way, the woman wanted to take an additional husband, it isn't something the person went and took on their own, and then their other partner found it out. As we started moving away from that, people moving into the city, staying on their own, not having exactly the same perspectives, the church entered it, and then the church and sometimes the mosque was trying to help people to have common paradigms. But we ignored to discuss these issues which existed then. Secondly, as we started leaving our communities, one of the things that happened to us is that it meant that we have no support, we have no counsel, and people have to be figuring out whatever it is. So if you are in marriage and you are not unhappy and you start going out, you know, you pick up a friend, you don't know how to emotionally regulate and control yourself, you get some support, and, you know, and so we just grew into that practice over time. This practice is not new. It's just that, like many things, social media and the conversations we have there have made it more obvious, and now we are measuring it. But way back in my father's time, I knew this practice. You know, I know, you know, almost many of the men that I knew around my dad, you know, actually had side chicks and eventually had children by them. But on the same time, we also had men who were in this community with them and they didn't behave in that way. Because we have not been talking about it, people have now come to accept that it is okay. If you're unhappy in your marriage, it is okay, and all of those kind of things. And we've not also talked about it and asked ourselves, why is it happening and what is the root, so that we can address it. Instead, we have been putting a plaster on it by, you know, saying, oh, perhaps the woman behaved in this way, or perhaps the man behaved in this way. And then because we also now also have a culture of don't wash your dirty linen in the public. Usually when these things happen, it is reported either to the parents and the family, or it is reported. Now, most of these people do not even begin to understand the trauma that betrayal causes. So how is it often handled? It's just handled, okay, we have spoken to him, we have spoken to her, and you people should let bygones be bygones. But you see, a person whose heart was torn into pieces, that it has not been addressed. The person who betrayed, because he himself did not quite, or she himself didn't know what was going on in their mind, what you find is that after some time, it happens again. So for me as a person, the things that the statistics that we're seeing in public now, it isn't that they are just, these things have now suddenly gone up. It's just that there is more reporting of what has been lost for a very long time.
For a long time. Interesting. Ejiro, what changes do you see in society that is suddenly making this abnormalities, particularly within, believers? My interest, is really about the believers. Once upon a time, it was, an unspeakable thing, but today, it's really not a big deal anymore. What has changed in society, just from where Mrs. Aherim left off? What do you think has changed society that has suddenly made this tolerable, if you like?
Well, so what is happening is that people who are supposed to be Christians, there's a blend now that people who are supposed to be Christians, they are copying paradigms and principles from the world. So it's a little of God and a little of the world. And because the word is usually very, very loud, people are paying a lot of attention. There are things that have crept into the church that are now common church lingua that has nothing to do with the Bible at all, right? Marriage is a casualty of the devil's agenda to ensure that God's plan for families fail. So what is happening? What is happening today is an unforeseen effects. So what the church do, what Christians do today, many of them that they call, that are considered to be Christian practices, many of them, they have no biblical root at all. That's the reason why this is happening.
Ma, do you think that, I know you've alluded to it, but are we playing the ostrich? I mean, the church on these matters. What do you think?
Based on my experience, with my 20,000 member strong Facebook group, we have played the ostrich for a very long time. How do I know that? First, when people come into my counseling room, the first question they ask me is, Ma, are you a pastor?
Wow.
And they tell me that part of the reason they're asking that question is some of them actually say, I don't want to talk to a pastor. Now, I don't think that they're averse to pastors. I think it's just because they already know the direction that the pastor will go. And they already know that, just like Ejiro said, a lot of what the Bible is, the pastor is going to say might not be biblically sound. And it is also something that they have seen cause hurt. I think that in the bid to protect God's reputation over time, the church has pretended that things that are happening between them do not happen. I give you an illustration. I think about 2 years ago, a friend of mine asked for counsel on Facebook, and this was it. A young boy of about 12 told his mom that he didn't want to be going to church again. And the mom was worried. And the mom asked, and the boy said, I know things about the pastor.
Oh, wow.
Who is preaching every day. And I don't know how you people can be listening to him and imagining that you did not know. So what I said to my friend to tell the boy's mother is to say, okay, you know what, chap, I agree with you. Let's not go to church. Let's just be reading the Bible at home every Sunday. Because that would help the young man to grow up knowing that I can search for answers myself and I don't have to be conflicted. What was happening in that particular situation happens in a lot of our churches. So we know things about people's relationship. A second illustration that I will also give, again, it was someone was going to invite me to the church. Their pastors had actually left home. And the reason she left home is because there was abuse. And Eventually, the church leader spoke to her to come back, and they wanted to invite me to speak. And I said to them, I said, given this scenario, the only way I will come to speak is if as many people as is possible will come with their wife, including your pastor, and they will sit together. And I will not speak on the pulpit and preach. I would actually facilitate a conversation between all the couples. I never heard back from them. Again, it is because what I was proposing was going to affect the facade that they have in their church congregation, that we are a holy people and things don't go wrong here. Now, the young people are seeing all of this. As a result, what Ejiro said is happening. So they're feeling we cannot trust our elders in our community to be our models for marriage. These folks that we see on social media, it looks like as if they know what they're doing, especially when, they are promoting, romantic love, everything love, and everything. So our young people are copying from them. And one of the consequences of that is that the relationships they build are shallow. If side chicks is not happening after people marry, even when they are just dating, multiple partners, unfaithfulness, even in dating.
Wow. Ejiro, how can we guard ourselves and our marriages against the temptation that, the culture, the culture that we have today, very permissive, anything goes, and I'm happy that you are outside the country, because I'm going to ask you as a follow-up question, how do you situate this Japa syndrome? How is it affecting homes and marriages? So over to you.
Okay. First of all, right, the first question is, there are problems that can be solved because the problem is an easy problem to solve. And there are problems that can be solved that are difficult to solve because there's no basis for it. So my illustration would be, you have a car and the car doesn't just have gas. You know that that's what the problem is. So what do? You top up the gas. But you have a car and you know that that car has no engine, right? What do you do in that situation? Many people are getting into marriage with a car with no engine at all, right? While if you entered into marriage as a Christian gets married to a Christian, not a Christian got married to somebody that they know is not a Christian. And you are now expecting Christian behavior from a person that is not a Christian. So the primary way to mitigate this issue of side chick or whatever is to get married to a person who shares the same belief and conviction as you do, not somebody who you assume does. They share the same belief and conviction. Is this important to them? You are a lady, you are dating a guy, and this guy has 7 girlfriends, and and he's choir director, and he's usher in church, and his pastor's protocol. He has 7 girlfriends, and for whatever reason, you gave him an ultimatum that if he doesn't leave those 7 girlfriends and marry you, that you would leave him. He looked very well and he saw that maybe you are better for marriage, maybe you are responsible or whatever that he looked for. He decided to get married to you. What you don't know is that you just got what you wanted. In your opinion, you were so beautiful, so good enough, you were able to dispel the other girls. You don't know that you just got married to a polygamist in training, because a man that can sustainably keep multiple women at the same time, and most of them don't know about each other, is a polygamist in training. That's exactly what it's going to be. So just because he got married to you, you did the wedding and everything, it does not mean that his appetite and his desire to seek out for what he should seek in one woman in multiple women, it does not mean that it suddenly disappears. A lot of the women who are fighting about the side chick related issue as of this day, many of them, they knew who they were getting married to. And who they were getting married to, they knew that this person does not fear God. They knew that this person was not accountable to nobody at all. Now you're expecting a Christian behavior from a person that is not a Christian. You're expecting a person to behave as though they fear God, when in reality they don't fear God or care about what God has to say in that regard. So the primary way to mitigate this issue is to do enough investigation before you get into. Otherwise, what a lot of people do in marriage is called damage control. Usually, people don't change. People don't just change dramatically. And you cannot love a person enough for the person to just immediately change. It doesn't happen. Now, for people who are married and supposedly they married a Christian, and for whatever reason, let's say for 10, 15 years, there was nothing like that, and suddenly it began to happen. This is exactly what it is. The devil knows that marriage is like a domino. If you eat one, everything falls apart. If the devil wants to destroy family, the devil's primary strategy is to attack marriages. And how does he do it? He uses the man against the woman, and he uses the woman against the man. And most times he's using both people against each other. So the woman who might be the victim in this regard, many times, the woman might be indirectly even playing a role that is leading to our predicaments. I'll give you a classic example. Let's say, for whatever reason, right, there are women who ration sex. And let's say you want your man to have sex once every 3 weeks or once in a month. And the man is no longer complaining, and you think it's okay. What a lot of women don't know is that the day a man gets married, for whatever reason, that man suddenly begins to shine. Women who would naturally not pay attention to him before suddenly begins to pay attention to him. And if you are a woman married to a man and other women are not interested in that man, what that means is that you are not fully invested in it, because your grace begins to shine on that man, and women would naturally not notice him, would not just notice him, they would want him. So in that regard, there's a role that wives play. Then for the men too, a lot of men don't think about the consequences of infidelity. They don't think about it. If they think about it, if they think what they tend to lose, many of them would be more reluctant to get into it, because sex is a spiritual sacrifice and a covenant relationship that leads to the establishment of an altar that requires servicing. When it is engaged in the platform of marriage, it's a sacrifice that is holy and acceptable unto God. When it is engaged outside marriage, it's a sacrifice that is going otherwise. So every time a man engages in that practice outside the union of marriage, the person is doing obeisance to the devil. He's sacrificing his authority, his control, everything to the devil. So long and short is that there are people who are willful participants and there are people who are lawful captives. They don't want to get into it, but it's actually very, very difficult. And Pastor, you know that for a fact, as you are, in whatever capacity that you operate in, there are tons of women that want you. Not just because they like you, they want you because you are married. They want you because they cannot get you. There are tons of women. It's just like that. You don't even have to be extraordinary. Just for the fact that you have a wife, they want you. They want to know what this woman is saying. And it's just crazy. This thing happens. It is just what it is. That's the answer to the first question.
The second one.
May I add to this before you go on?
Go ahead,
I think, just like Ariro has said, we underestimate the power of our environment around us. One of the things that we have started doing now is that we actually conduct a vulnerability to infidelity assessment, even for people who are not getting ready to marry. And I was shocked. Dr. Shirley Glass, she's late now. I'm told she's called the grandmother of infidelity. She's one of the people who pioneered and said, let's find out why this is happening. And with
what's her name again, ma? Sorry, what's her name? What's her name?
Dr. Shirley Glass. I'll send it to you after the so all right, when we started to do this assessment, one of the reasons was to help young men and young women. I remember that one of the most profound moments for me is when a young woman who goes through our Get Yourself Ready for Marriage program for singles, after doing that assessment, said to me that, Ma, I didn't know that I was vulnerable to infidelity. She's not somebody who would ever consider cheating. But when she did the assessment and she read the additional resources about, how infidelity plays out, and all of those kind of things, she suddenly realized that just by being in her line of work, which requires her to travel all the time, and she's in the company of her male colleagues in the hotel, she can, it's easy to sleep. What did that awareness do for her? It made her to say, wow, if this is possible, how do I become a conscious participant in my life so that I don't just slip into it? That awareness is lacking for most people. So I also had a client who after he told me the scenario, I said to him, have you considered that perhaps it is this girl who saw you first and actually laid a bait for you? And he looked at me and I started helping him to understand how that was a possibility. Again, because men in our culture feel that they are the chasers and the women are the people they are chasing. They very quickly lose sight of the fact that the side chick might actually have been the person who studied them, because what this girl was doing was that every morning when this guy would get to the same office building that they were in, she just happened to be in the lift at the time. Every single day that she was going up. And from there, they became friends, and one thing led to another. So not even being aware, just thinking that, people are people who have self-control and all of those kind of things also contributes to it. There is a need for us to do more study of these things and how it happens and why people feel. I can share many illustrations. There is a story of the guy who grew up, his parents broke and he went with his father. And different women used to come and visit his dad under the guise of he's supporting them. And when he grew up and married his wife, the primary thing that his wife was unhappy about is the fact that, women are always coming and, as far as she was concerned, he was flirting. After he went through a process with me, it took me saying to him, it means you learned from your father not to have boundaries with women. And he asked me what that meant. And we said to point it out. And then he said, what you are saying now is what my wife is always saying. But when his wife said it to him, it was defensive. He didn't see it as him getting into trouble. And he didn't know that he was being baited by those women.
Thank you so much. If you are just joining us, this is the Roundtable with Noruwa Edokpolo, where we have conversations on contemporary issues in the Christian faith. And today we're talking about what to do with the side chicks and the side cocks. We just added that. My guests are Ejiro Okolo and Mrs. Modukwe Ehirim. By the way, if you are listening to this, please share the link with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to my channel so that whenever we have something new, you get to be among the first to see it. Now, Ejiro, let me ask you, in what ways do you think that the modern views on marriage and relationship conflicts with the Bible design? So here we are today. The Bible, the Word of God is certain, is sure, it doesn't change. But there's a conflict now between the ways of God and the modern ways that we see. In which of those, in which way do you see that conflict playing out?
Well, so I'm seeing that people are trying to get what they consider to be the best of both worlds, right? The Bible has a standard. And the Bible standard is that husband, love your wife. It's not love your well-behaved wife, right? The Bible standard is wives, submit to your husband. It's not submit to your husband that is a provider. It's submit to your husband. So if you want to do Bible according to what God says, right? It's actually not very, very easy because it's a war against the flesh. Right? There's no proof that all men are more intelligent than women. And there's no proof that all women are more intelligent than men. So in that regard, the Bible did not say, wives, submit to your wise husband, because there are many husbands who are foolish. But the Bible says, wives, submit to your husband. It did not say submit to all men. It did not say submit to every man. The Bible did not say men are superior to women. The Bible says the husband is the head of his wife. And the Bible says the wife should honor and submit to the husband. So there are people now who pick some things from the Bible that suits them, and they try to pick some things from the world, and they try to want to blend it together to try to get what they consider to be a perfect mix. But this is what it is. The standard of God and the standard of the world is like oil and water. It cannot mix together. But this is what people are trying to do. They're trying to mix it and mix it and mix it and mix it. A lot of people don't understand that your marriage is not about you. If you're a Christian, your marriage, first of all, is about God, is agenda, first before your personal happiness. So everything you are doing is, first of all, to honor God and to advance his agenda and his cause. And if you are trying to have a marriage that is going to be heaven on earth, it has to be more God-centric than you-centric or your spouse-centric. So if you are married and you are expecting your spouse to put you first, you are likely going to have a bad marriage. First of all, because if your spouse does not put God first, your spouse will not be able to put you first. Now, there's an issue with that. I'm not saying that your spouse puts God first to the extent that you don't matter anymore. Marriage is two-faced. There's a service to God and there's a service to your spouse. You should not serve, like as it is said in the Bible, you should not give what belongs to Caesar. You should give what belongs to Caesar, right? So there's a part of it that marriage itself is supposed to be a sacrifice in God's altar. Then it is by doing that, then there's another dimension that it is now a service to the kingdom to advance God's interest, God's agenda. Then it is by doing that you as a person now gets the benefits of putting God first in your relationship. Now, there's a lot of social constructs, right? Feminism, there's a lot of things going on in the world now that is gradually getting infiltrated into the church, and they're almost being accepted as this is how it should be, right? If you are not trying to have a Bible marriage, don't expect a biblical outcome from a marriage that is both partly Bible and partly from the word. You want to get this, you want to get that, because I'm seeing a lot of campaign going on now where it's on a low key, men against women. On a low key, the men are saying that the women are not doing this, the women are not doing that, the women are also saying that the men are not doing this, the men are not doing that. Now, because in this modern time, there are a lot of women, especially here in the West, who do not necessarily need to marry you to provide for them financially. And in Africa and some other parts of the world where the man used to be the predominant provider of finances, because in marriage, a man needs to provide 5 different things for his wife in 5 different areas. And in Africa, most of the time, what men provides is money, finances, whereas a man needs to provide spiritually for his wife. He has to be a spiritual cover for her. That if he has a wife in his life, there are some things that should not happen to her because he's a spiritual cover. A man needs to provide for his wife emotionally. What does that mean? Emotional needs are taken care of, and finances cannot replace emotional needs. A man needs to provide for his wife physically. What does that mean? That whether he has to physically protect her, whether he has to get involved in the process of raising the children, in doing things, do things actively for her, especially if his schedule permits. But the whole idea is that, for instance, domestic work is not the work of the wife. Raising children is not the work of the wife, it's the work of a parent. Feeding your child, bathing your child, taking care of things is not the work of a mother. When a child wakes up 3 a.m. at night, it's not the work of the mother. It is the work of a parent. A responsible parent will do what is necessary. A husband also needs to provide for his wife mentally. That means your presence in her life should improve her mindset. She should think better. She should know better. So essentially, when men say, oh, I pay all the bills, and they see that their wife is still frustrated, she's angry, and they assume that she's ungrateful, it is because even the women who are saying that they want a provider, they don't understand that it's just like saying, you say you want something, and I ask you, what do you want? You cannot really tell me, you cannot really communicate. You are just frustrated that you're just frustrated about something, but you don't know what it is, and you expect me to know what it is, and you expect me to give it to you, whereas you don't know what it is. So a lot of the women who are complaining about that they want a man that's a provider, they are talking about money. So men are providing the money now, and they are surprised that my father used to do this, everything was okay. But now I'm doing this. These women, I don't know what they want. Yes, they want to be provided for spiritually. They want to be provided for emotionally. They wanted to be provided for mentally. They wanted to be provided for physically. So that's my answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Ma, you spoke earlier and you said something about them asking you, are you a pastor? Now, there's something I'm noticing, and that is, there seems to be a, not even subtle anymore now, to undermine, the word of God, the men of God, etc., etc., etc. Now, the challenge with that is, if you undermine the word of God, if you undermine the men of God, what then happens is that after some time, people begin to then undermine the ways of God. Okay? So, for example, if any woman were to go out now and say that I submit to my husband, they may even abuse her and say, what do you mean? You are old-fashioned. I don't know if you're getting it. Meanwhile, the Bible says, submit to your husband. If a man goes out there now and say, oh, I love my wife, they will say, come on, you are a foolish man. What do you mean by you love your wife? Blah, blah, blah. So my question is, those couples that want to honor God with their marriages, how can you encourage them not to be ashamed to follow the biblical, mandates, if you like, for marriage? What kind of counsel will you give to them? The young couple, the middle-aged couple that say, you know what, we want to honor God in our homes. We don't want to be ashamed to say we are Christians and we are doing marriage according to the word of God, even though the world may laugh at them and mock at them.
That's a really great question that you've asked, because it's the primary reason why I went onto social media. First of all, to be able to do that. But let me first speak to the pastors. There is a tendency generally when people criticize for us to become defensive, especially, as I said, because we feel that God has a reputation to protect. I love the Old Testament. One of the reasons I love the Old Testament is that is a place where God showed us that he is a God who is associated with mercies and is comfortable with it. Otherwise, the story of David would not be in the Bible. The story of other men of God and women of God who also were weak would not be in the Bible. It's not our duty to protect the reputation of God. It's our duty to disciple the people that God puts under our care. We do a lot of meetings, we invite speakers, we talk and things like that. Those things are just like water off the back. If we are honest with ourselves, many of us take notes. How many of us go back home? So discipleship is the chief thing that is missing. When we look at the verses that Ariro spoke about, when I speak to people in, working one-on-one with them, I tell them that people, you cannot apply Ephesians 5 if you did not read Ephesians 1, 2, 3, 4. Because like he said, the person who has experienced the transformative power of God, the person who understands from Ephesians 2 that, but for the grace of God, me and that person I'm criticizing, we are in the same boat. The person who understands that the gifts that they have, God gave it to them so that they can be a channel of God, enlightening other people until all of us are made. The person who in chapter 4 sees all the practical attributes is the person who will arrive at chapter 5 and then understand what submission and love is. So I agree totally with him that that's a critical reason why we are having the disconnect. Now, for the couple who the husband is that way and the wife is that way, I beg them to understand one thing. Many stories on social media are just multiplied. So it's one story that is being shared and is being shared and is being shared. And negativity bias, once you begin to see something, in that way, immediately you begin to look for it in yourself. What do you need to do? Bible says that God has not given us a spirit of bondage again to fear, but a spirit of power, of love, and of a sound mind. When people say, I'm afraid, if I share my positive story on social media or in public, something may, in fact, I've seen people write that we wrote about ourselves and things started happening in our marriage. Things happen in your marriage because you are human beings. One of the things that I grew up with in the Baptist church is an understanding that nobody can do anything to you if God has not said he can do it to you. We see that in the story of Job. So the first thing for such couples is to realize that they are on the right path. It doesn't matter if 99 other stories are doing all of those kind of things. The fact that they are experiencing that bliss and joy is their own grace. They need to understand that God is depending on them to showcase to the public that this thing you people say is impossible, with God, it is possible. So that what happened in Antioch will now happen, because part of the reason I came on social media is so that people will come and ask me and say, Mommy Mo, every day you are saying that marriage is good. How can it be good when we are seeing all of these kind of things? If we don't talk about what God is doing in our lives, that doesn't mean, as I said, protecting God's reputation. I've shared stories on social media of how me and my husband in our early days, things fell apart. We were nearly going our separate ways because he said, if this is the way you are going to be doing, come and start going to your father's house. And he went to my father and told my father that he has asked me to go. And then I tell the people who, when I speak and share these things, I say, so how did we go from there to now still be together after 39 years? And then I talk about the grace of God, the wisdom of God. Like Ejiro said, if there is anything that has made me a better Christian in my life, it's my marriage. And I'm saying this there. Most people don't also know this about me, that for many years of my life, my husband was not even a believer. But I remember the book by Professor Fomum of Cameroon. Is late now. In his book on marriage, yes, in his book on marriage, he helped me to see the responsibility I had under God. And it helped me to see that, sometimes the weaknesses that my husband was showing were just human weaknesses of somebody who does not know the way of God. And that God was depending on me as a missionary. Was I going to be the kind of missionary that would draw him to God? Or was I going to be the kind of missionary who doesn't care about God's person because I am uncomfortable with the way? So people who are Christians, yes, let them agree. They will make mistakes. They are human beings. They and their husband will have issues along the way. You don't need to think that because of one failure, therefore your testimony is bad. Even me, girl, with all these things, when I started being on social media, one of my greatest fears is that, hey, one day people will go and discover that me and my husband, we have problems. So should I really be standing in the way I'm standing? And then I went to God and I came to the conclusion that, am I not a human being? Is there any human being that God has created that will not fall? Is it not the grace of God that is helping us to remain standing? That yes, because I'm now a public figure and my testimony is important, I will continue to do the best to allow the fruit of the Spirit to show in my life. That's my responsibility, to allow the character of Christ to be formed in me. And part of that character of Christ would be to admit when I am less than who I should be, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It is human. I will admit it to God. I will admit it to the people I am with, and I will go merrily along my way. Does my error reduce the efficacy of the work of Jesus Christ? No. Oh. So couples who are Christian do need to, and who are Christian and who know that they're disciples of Jesus Christ, who know that in their marriage they're living for God, They need to be honest about their experiences. They need to remember that it is the grace of God at work in them. And they need to understand that God is not afraid, even if they get into a mess. He is still going to use their lives.
Thank you so much.
Yes, he's still going to use their lives.
Thank you so much. And I think I just want to make this comment here, particularly to, pastors, et cetera, et cetera. She says that we don't need to, we don't need to defend God. And I've always known that, it was Dagon that needed them to protect him. It was Dagon that needed the people to fight for him. And so vulnerability, particularly as a Christian leader, is a sign of strength, not of weakness. All right? That you are vulnerable says to the people, yes, I'm your pastor, but I'm also human. I get hungry, I can fall, anything can happen. And I think that from my own little experience, the more real you are as a pastor, the easier it is for you to lead the people that God has given to you. So, Ejiro, just by way of, I'm just asking myself, how do you even know if your spouse has a side chick or a side cock? Are there any telltale signs? Are there things that might be an indication that suddenly, my husband is beginning to look out, or my wife has a new friend? Can you give us any tips, any such thing? And Madam, when it's done, I also like to hear from you. Ejiro, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, the first thing is that anybody can be a victim. Anybody. There's nobody that is too strong. And at every time, there's somebody that is after your spouse. The day you decide to get married, or you just even want to do right by your spouse, you are not even a Christian, you're on the devil's to-do list. If you want to do right by your spouse, you just want to do right, you want to be faithful, because the requirements for you to be good to your spouse are the same things with the fruit of the Spirit, right? And as long as you are trying to cultivate the fruit of the Spirit, you are on the devil's to-do list. So first of all, like I said, everybody, there's somebody that is after your spouse. Know that for free, right? And they are not necessarily after your spouse. Some of them, they have different reasons why they're after your spouse. Now, the reasons that you can see as signals, right? One of them is intimacy. Another one is communication, right? There are a lot of spouses, there are a lot of people who they cannot really talk about the things that really matters to them with their spouse. Maybe it's really not interested, or maybe she's really not interested. And there are people that don't understand that it is your best interest to take interest in the interest of your spouse because of the interest of your marriage. There are interests that your spouse has that it is in your best interest to take interest in. And then, women say things like, my husband don't talk, or he doesn't talk to me. That's it, true and false. Your husband talks, it's just that the things he talks about are not things that both of you can talk about or both of you are interested in. Then another thing too, in this regard about my husband don't talk, there are a lot of men or women who are married to people that they know that they are not smart, that they know that they cannot really get counsel from them, because most of them, maybe they got married to them because of he's handsome or he's beautiful. After you go married, you now found out this person is really, really foolish. I can't really get valuable wisdom and knowledge and understanding. Then there are some people too who are so full of themselves, who are know-it-alls, right? And then nobody can tell them anything. What they forget is there's something I call the ignorant experts. Just because you're a neurosurgeon, it does not mean that you are a dentist. As a neurosurgeon, there are things that you don't know about molecular genetics, right? So your expertise in one area. So there are men who maybe they are this MD CEO and they are running a company with thousands of people. It does not mean that they know jack about parenting. So long and short is intimacy is one of them. Two, and intimacy is not just sex, right? When couples are growing apart, if they are sensitive, they would know. There are signs that they know. Sometimes these signs are not what necessarily that you may be able to say with words, but they are signs that you will see, you will feel if you are connected. Communication is another one, very, very important. Then playing the gender card. You know, subconsciously, a lot of men are in this game, men and women are in this game against each other. The men are for the men, the women are for the women. And the men have a bias that everything that men do is right. The women have a bias that everything that women do is right. So subconsciously, they are fighting against each other. And let me give an example. Let's say you play soccer. There are couples who, if the husband is in Arsenal, the wife would be in Chelsea. And she does that intentionally in many things. And it could be vice versa, right? In their quest of getting it to be interesting. She doesn't like Chelsea or he doesn't like Arsenal, but they are there together just to be on opposite teams so that they can argue, so that they can disagree. So one of them, like I said, is communication, intimacy, taking opposite sides. You are not on the same team. It's us versus them. And it's a subconscious thing. And these things continue to happen. Men justify some of the most ridiculous things that other men do. He beat his wife. And maybe she used to do this. Maybe you don't know what she did. Oh, the wife did that to her husband. Maybe she used to do this. So they just come up with things that are not well-founded, are things that were not well thought through. So intimacy, communication.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am. What are the signs that, your spouse is beginning to look out?
Okay. I think, first of all, let's also talk about the signs that you are beginning to look out. Because
okay.
That's really important for us also to talk about. So if you have a wife or a husband that you have said, this is the person that I've given my life to, that I'm going to spend my life with, when you find yourself being more comfortable in the company of someone else, the things you can share with them, that's a sign to you that your heart is straying. And your heart is straying because you are not finding satisfaction in the person that you have chosen. The real work is actually to take that as a trigger and say to yourself, wow, something is beginning to happen. Let me explore what is happening and figure out how to resolve this so that this person can now become the more important part of my life. The second thing is environmentally, are you vulnerable? So people who work in sales, thank God for the bad economy, all those let us go and do draw and all those kind of things are no longer happening. But the thing is that sometimes environmentally or at work, you find yourself being exposed. Most people never plan to cheat on their spouse. They just also happen to be positioned in the company of people who say to them, there's nothing wrong. You go on a work trip, everybody has a girl, they arrange a girl for you, you say no, and you have to be going on those work trips all of the time. When that is happening, that's a sign to you when you begin to feel her. In order to be like the boys or in order not to stand out, you are on your way to, all that is now required is for an appropriate person. Another thing is, when you're somebody who feels that you are the savior of people, especially in a country where many people have challenges. So, people come to tell you what their problem is, what their needs are, what their partner is doing to them. And this is the person that you and them are on the same committee at work or in church or in the resident association. So what Ejiro alluded to, so without intending it, you are building intimacy with this person. They're becoming important to you. I remember a young woman who, she had a friend who will call her on the way home, call her and ask her when she has gotten home. It took the sensitivity of her husband. This was a common friend of hers, of theirs as a family, and they were attending the same church. It so happened at this time that the husband was not emotionally available. And this lady, just likes the idea that somebody cared enough about her to be finding out. And when they came to me, and everything, I had to call her aside and say to her that this guy is a good friend. However, what you need to do now, what you need to understand is that you are gradually sliding into an emotional relationship with him. So many people, we need, all of us need to be aware, like Ejiro said, we are all prone to it. And the reason we are prone to it is ignorance. We don't even know how that happens. Everybody considers infidelity a bad thing and wonder why people do it. But we've never sat down to understand. So let me go over again. Once you find yourself in any way being more comfortable or attracted to somebody, either you are the person, carrying their burdens, or you are giving your burdens to them to carry, it means something is already happening. Now that is happening because the person you have chosen to be the carrier of your burdens and who you should be the carrier of their burdens, something is happening in your own relationship. The place to face is that and to do the work. The second thing also is to know that environmentally, if you are in a community where every time somebody cheats, people have an excuse why that person cheated, know that you are susceptible to it and also keep a watch. And thirdly, don't be a savior. Once you find yourself being a savior for somebody, especially somebody of the opposite sex, there is a chance that you're going to slide down the way. Many people currently ended up having side chicks because the side chick is from a family that is not able to take care, so paying school fees, giving them things to help their family. If that situation is presented to you, what you're supposed to do is to present it to your partner, and both of you should address it together. I think the last thing I want to say in this thing is that our minds have been messed up about what we see in the community. You are actually the biggest protection for your partner. One of my friends who was very effective in keeping himself on edge, he and his wife had a routine. If he's in the hotel and all these girls who they are working with start propositioning him, he just picks up his phone and calls his wife and say, another of those your friends are with me, or do you want to speak with her? And he will give the phone to the girl. After some time, all his colleagues knew that this man is a no-go area. He will call his wife. So for both men and women, even though we've had people cheat, everything, but the honest to goodness truth is prepare your heart. Can you be the kind of person that when temptation is presented to your partner, they can call on you to be their shield against that temptation? And that perhaps is what separates believers from unbelievers.
Thank you so much, Ma. As we begin to wind down today, now you notice that purposefully I have not focused on how to deal with it, because next month, by the grace of God, we're going to be talking about, recovery from adultery. All right. So today we've kind of like looked at the problem, where it's coming from, what is causing it, etc., etc. And by God's grace, next week, on the third Wednesday, remember we meet on the first and the third Wednesday of every month. On the third Wednesday of November, we will be looking at adultery full blown, all right, and seeing how do we deal with it? How do we recover from adultery? It has been another wonderful and insightful edition of the Roundtable with Noruwa Edokpolo. Today, we've looked at what do we do with the side chick and the side cock. I've just been made to understand. And I really want to say a big thank you to my guests, Ejiro Kolo and Mrs. Modukwe Ehirim. It's been my pleasure. something says to me, maybe we'll have an encore. I'll probably call you back at some other time, because particularly that issue of, mismatch, I think that's something to talk about. I mean, if we can arrest this problem, you know what I mean, before we get into marriage. So maybe, please just bear with me. I will come back to both of you so we can talk about, how do you pick the right partner? How do you ensure that this person that you are going with is the right one? Yes, Ejiro, we're going to discuss that book one of these days by the grace of God. Thank you so much, Madam. Thank you so much, Ejiro. This has been the Roundtable with Noruwa Edokpolo. Remember to follow me on Instagram at TRT with Noruwa, YouTube on the Roundtable with Noruwa, and on Facebook, the Roundtable with Noruwa Edokpolo. Thank you so much, Ma. Thank you so much, Ejiro. It's been a pleasure having you on this program. And I hope, just in case you are about to sign off with a side chick or a side cock, as the case may be, I'd like to say to you, don't start it, because when you do, you have no idea where it's going to end. It will destroy everything. All right? Everything you've held, everything you've treasured will be destroyed. So why don't you pick up your phone, talk to your spouse, call your pastor or a friend, just do something to break it. All right? It's not going to end up well. Okay? It's not worth it. That's the truth. It's not worth it. Okay? Thank you so much, Ma. Thank you so much, sir. It's been a pleasure, and God bless you. Bye.